You know this relationship isn't good for you. You've known it for a while. The people around you can see it. Maybe you can see it too, in the quiet moments, in the aftermath of another fight, in the exhaustion of always waiting for things to get better. And yet you stay, or you leave and come back, or you finally end it and spend months, sometimes years, unable to stop thinking about someone who hurt you more than anyone else ever has. And the most confusing part isn't the pain. It's that alongside the pain, there is something that feels like love, something deep and consuming and almost impossible to explain to someone who hasn't felt it. If that resonates, this video is about what's actually happening, because what you're experiencing has a name, and understanding it might be the first step toward finally being free of it. Trauma bonding is a term coined by psychologist Patrick Carnes to describe the powerful emotional attachment that forms between a person and someone who subjects them to cycles of abuse, manipulation, or mistreatment. It's most commonly associated with abusive relationships, but it doesn't require dramatic or obvious abuse to develop. It can form in relationships with chronic emotional unavailability, intermittent cruelty, repeated cycles of conflict and reconciliation, or any dynamic where pain and intimacy become deeply entangled. The defining feature of trauma bonding is not the pain itself, it's the cycle. And understanding that cycle is essential to understanding why leaving feels so impossibly hard. The cycle typically moves through four stages. It begins with tension, a gradual buildup of unease, walking on eggshells, the feeling that something is about to go wrong. Then comes the incident, the explosion, the cruelty, the betrayal, the moment of harm. Then reconciliation, the apology, the tenderness, the return of the person you fell in love with, the one who is warm and present and remorseful and everything you've been waiting for. And then calm, a honeymoon period where things feel almost normal, almost good, almost worth staying for. And then the tension begins to build again. This cycle, sometimes called the cycle of abuse, does something to the brain that goes far beyond ordinary relationship dynamics. Each reconciliation phase triggers a massive release of dopamine, oxytocin, and serotonin. The relief of the storm passing, the return of warmth after coldness, the feeling of being loved again after being hurt. These experiences activate the brain's reward system with an intensity that normal, stable relationships simply don't produce. The brain begins to associate this person with both the deepest pain and the most profound relief it has ever experienced. And over time, the relief becomes dependent on the pain that precedes it. You can't have the high without the low. You can't feel the love without first surviving the hurt. This is not weakness. This is neuroscience. Research using brain imaging has shown that the neural patterns of trauma bonding are remarkably similar to those of addiction. The same regions of the brain that activate in substance dependence, the nucleus accumbens, the prefrontal cortex, the amygdala, are activated in trauma-bonded relationships. The person who is hurting you has become, neurologically, a source of both threat and reward. And the brain, wired for survival and pattern recognition, becomes consumed with managing that contradiction. You become hypervigilant to their moods. You develop an almost psychic sensitivity to subtle shifts in their energy. You learn to read the room with extraordinary precision because reading the room correctly means surviving it. And all of that attention, all of that focus, all of that emotional labor directed toward one person creates a bond that feels, from the inside, like the most intense love you have ever known. It is not love, or rather, it is love, entangled with fear and relief and neurological dependency in ways that make it almost indistinguishable from the real thing. There is another dimension to trauma bonding that is rarely discussed, the role of intermittent reinforcement in creating attachment. We touched on this in the first video, the dopamine response to unpredictable rewards. But in trauma bonding, intermittent reinforcement operates at a much more intense level, because the reward isn't just attention or warmth, it's safety. When someone has the power to hurt you and then chooses not to, the relief is neurologically overwhelming. When someone who has been cold suddenly becomes tender, the contrast amplifies the tenderness beyond anything it would feel like in a stable relationship. You are not imagining the connection. You are not weak for feeling it. You are experiencing the predictable neurological outcome of an unpredictable and threatening environment. The bond feels unbreakable because, in a very real neurological sense, it has been forged under conditions that the brain treats as survival level important. Why is leaving so hard? This is the question that people on the outside, friends, family, sometimes therapists, struggle to understand. Why don't you just leave? The answer is never simple, but it tends to involve several layers that are worth naming clearly. The first is the neurological dependency we've already described. Leaving means withdrawing from a source of both pain and profound relief. The withdrawal is real, physically and emotionally. The anxiety, the obsessive thinking, the physical longing. These are not signs of weakness or poor judgment. They are withdrawal symptoms. The second is the distortion of the self that happens over time in these relationships. Trauma bonding rarely exists in isolation. It usually develops alongside a gradual erosion of self-worth, self-trust, and perception of reality. You have been told, directly or indirectly, that your perceptions are wrong, that you are too sensitive, that you are lucky to be loved at all, that nobody else would want you, that the problems in the relationship are your fault. Over time, these messages become internalized. And when you internalize the belief that you are the problem, leaving feels not like freedom, but like confirmation of your worst fears about yourself. The third is the hope, the genuine, persistent, heartbreaking hope that the person from the reconciliation phase is the real one, that the warmth you felt during the calm is who they truly are, that if you just love them better, or differently, or more patiently, that version of them will stay. This hope is not delusional. It is a rational response to real evidence, because that person does exist. The warmth is real. The tenderness during reconciliation is real. The tragedy is that it is not sustainable, and that waiting for it to become permanent keeps you locked in a cycle that is slowly dismantling you. Healing from trauma bonding is one of the most difficult psychological processes a person can go through. And it is important to say that clearly, without minimizing it. This is not something you think your way out of. It requires time, support, and in most cases, professional help. But there are things that make a difference. The first is understanding what is happening at a neurological level. Not to excuse the other person's behavior, but to stop blaming yourself for the bond. You did not choose this. Your brain responded to an extreme environment in the way brains respond to extreme environments. That is not a character flaw. That is biology. The second is breaking the cycle of contact. Every time you return, every text, every conversation, every moment of reconnection, the neurological cycle resets. The bond reinforces itself. No contact, or as close to it as your circumstances allow, is not cruelty. It is the only way to give your nervous system the space it needs to begin recalibrating. The third is rebuilding the relationship with your own perception. Trauma bonding distorts your sense of reality. So rebuilding means learning to trust your own experience again. Journaling helps. Therapy helps. Talking to people who knew you before the relationship helps. Slowly, carefully, reconstructing a version of yourself that exists independently of this person's assessment of you. The fourth is grief. Real, sustained grief for the relationship. Not for what it was, but for what you needed it to be. The love was real. The hope was real. And those things deserve to be mourned, not dismissed. Allowing yourself to grieve without returning is one of the hardest and most important parts of the process. You are not weak for staying. You are not stupid for loving someone who hurt you. You are not broken for finding it hard to leave. You are someone whose nervous system was shaped by an experience designed, even if not intentionally, to create exactly the bond you feel. That bond does not define you. It does not mean you are incapable of healthy love. It does not mean that this is all you deserve. It means you survived something that the human brain was never designed to navigate easily. And the fact that you are here, asking these questions, trying to understand, means that some part of you already knows there is something better on the other side of this. The next video is about something different, what secure attachment actually looks like, and whether it's something that can be built regardless of how you started. Leave a comment with one word that describes how this video made you feel. I'll see you in the next one.